Hello and welcome to the Mental Health Advantage podcast, where HR, benefits, and total rewards leaders explore the future of workplace well-being. I'm your host, Stephen Sokoler, founder and CEO of Journey, the leading proactive mental health solution for modern companies. In each episode, we bring you expert insights, real-world strategies, and candid conversations on creating healthier, more productive workplaces. Make sure you subscribe so you never miss an episode. Now let's dive in. Hello and welcome to the Mental Health Advantage podcast, where we explore how leaders in HR, benefits, and total rewards are shaping the future of employee well-being. Today, I'm joined by Dominic Cole-Morgan, Group Reward Director at WPP, one of the world's leading creative transformation companies, ad agency, communication company, and so much more. Dominic, how are you doing today?
I am doing very well. Thank you very much. And thanks for having me.
I am excited for this conversation. So you built a career designing global total reward strategies at some of the biggest multinational companies in the world, Goldman Sachs, Prudential, Scotia. But you started your career in psychology and industrial relations before moving into total rewards. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, the psychology was actually, I was following my mother's footsteps and did a psychology degree and then specialized with industrial relations and then moved into HR. I have to say the psychology was, I think, great. I would recommend anyone do a psychology degree. It's fantastic, but it gives you really great grounding in understanding why people make decisions, what sort of motivates people. And a lot of that is what you play through when you're designing benefits and mental health strategies as well. So I think that has been very helpful. Industrial relations, maybe less so. Probably it was more detrimental to my mental health than it was supportive, but the psychology has definitely been a good grounding.
So does a psychology degree or studying psychology help you to understand your own decisions any better, or is that still a mystery?
Physician healing thyself is a bit more difficult. It's very easy when it's other people. When it's yourself, you're caught up in the whole mess of your own mind.
Yeah, as a person who started a mental health company, and actually when we started, we were a meditation company. I can certainly relate to that. All right. So when it comes to total rewards, your experience designing reward strategies across Europe, Asia, North America, how do you see mental health benefits varying across cultures?
It's a great question, and it does vary. So, for example, the US is much more open to therapy and accessing that sort of direct mental health support in a way that actually is very open and very accepted in society. When you go to Asia, much less so. People tend to prefer the mental health support, which is maybe around sort of app-based or support or sort of meditation-based. So the access to sort of direct counseling or therapy is less. In the Europe, it's somewhere in between. There's a sort of a shift between the two. But I think what we're actually seeing is there's a demographic shift as well. So we're seeing that sort of more younger employees are definitely accessing differently through technology versus older. So you've got the culture and the demographic piece. But really, when we've designed it, we've not tried to have one size fits all, because I think that's going to be impossible. What we've tried to make sure is that there's a range of options available to all employees, regardless of their location, and make sure there is the support if someone's in a crisis, that very sort of immediate support you need if someone's very seriously having some mental problems, through to the sort of the preventative side, and then giving the options to the employees to be able to choose what they want. So it isn't around sort of tailoring your offering by region. It's offering everything everywhere, but recognizing that actually it's going to get picked up in different ways. But we're definitely seeing a demographic sort of bifurcation or differentiation of how people access or what they want, probably more than the cultural side actually at the moment.
That's really interesting. Yeah, I mean, there's a certain, in some ways, easy to group people as, by gender or by race or by country, but actually, or by generation. But there's quite a lot of intersectionality across these things that make it much more complicated than that. And I realized we hopped right in, but we didn't even talk about WPP in terms of the size and scope, which I think is important and worth mentioning because of the challenges that it presents. So maybe you want to touch on that, just where you guys are. It might even be easier to say where you guys aren't than where you are.
Yeah, no, I'm not even going to pretend to. So we're about 110,000 employees, and we're truly global. We're in pretty much most countries. Our largest populations are the US, the UK, and then it's sort of India and Germany and a few others. But actually, we have offices in pretty much most major countries. And what we offer is branding, marketing, advertising, a big focus on AI as well. So our population is moving, it's made up of creatives who do that amazing work that you see sort of in the Super Bowl adverts and things like that, through to sort of the whole AI piece around graphics and branding for organizations. So it's a fascinating company, enormous, very complicated, but really interesting.
Okay. Well, for me and for everybody listening, we know who to call when we do our Super Bowl ads.
Well, we're always quite proud of our Super Bowl ads.
All right. So, what unique challenges do companies like WPP that are so diverse and multinational face in delivering equitable mental health benefits to such a diverse global workforce?
Yeah, I mean, there's multiple. I mean, you obviously have to be aware of the sort of the legality, regulations that surround what you can and can't offer. I mean, obviously, there'll be some countries where you're limited in terms of sort of the psychiatric support you can offer. What also is complicated, but it is definitely worth navigating, is understanding the baseline support from the health services. So, for example, the UK NHS would be very different to the US in terms of sort of the healthcare model. So understanding what is the underlying offering from the sort of the baseline healthcare, and then integrating with that. So it has to be seamless. Employees need to be able to sort of hopefully access their private medical and then link into the NHS support if they need to as well. And in the US, it's much easier because it's all private. So you're able to integrate all that internally. But from country to country, we find that actually the offering will vary very significantly. In some places, actually Scandinavia, very well advanced in some of these elements. Other countries, it just doesn't exist. So you have to find where your baseline is. Are we doing soup to nuts, or are we actually doing adjunct on top of what is offered by the state? So that's one of them. Obviously, communication is very complicated. We're in X number of countries speaking Y number of languages, but you want the look and feel to be consistent and to have some sort of messaging and branding. We're a branded company after all. So that sort of trying to get the messaging consistent, but then translated into multiple countries and multiple cultures is pretty challenging as well. And then sort of to the point made earlier, really understanding sort of those cultural nuances of what to push and what to sort of hold back and sort of say this is available if you want it. The Asian countries, it probably is. We do actually go deeper on the sort of the self access ones, whereas in the US we're much more forward around the access to psychiatric support or psychologists and therapists. So yeah, you have to know sort of culturally where to lean in, but always having that backup of actually when someone does need something, they know where to get it.
Yeah, absolutely. And remind me, how long have you been at WPP?
A year and a half. So I moved here. I was living in Canada working for Scotiabank for 5 years. I moved back summer of 2023.
Got it. And prior to Scotiabank?
I was at Royal, but I was at Standard Life. It's an investment company in the UK.
Okay. The reason I asked the question is because you've obviously been around for a little while. I feel like when people tell me that, it makes me feel old, but I'm like, oh, I guess I got to own it.
Experience.
Experience. Yeah. Wisdom comes with that, right? How has the conversation about mental health changed at the leadership level over the past decade? Whether that's, evolved, obviously, as you've been at different companies, of course it changed, but I'm curious if there's a trajectory that you've seen there.
Yeah, I it's changed enormously. I mean, if I look back 10 years, trying to work out where I was 10 years ago, I'm not even sure it was a discussion at that point. And then I think it went through a sort of an evolution of being a discussion, but it was a bit of a discussion around, well, it's a cost to the organization that we just need to think about. And I think what was maybe a catalyst was the pandemic. Because I think what happened was suddenly everybody realized that their mental health was impacted in some way. I mean, even the most senior leaders if they were stuck in their sort of houses in lockdown and used to being in sort of very dynamic environments, their mental health would suffer. So I think there was a realization that actually mental health support or that everyone suffers from it was a shift. And I think that changed to leaders seeing it not so much as a problem to be managed or a cost to be mitigated, but actually a something to be prevented and also to become part of a broader narrative around mental well-being and wellness. So, and I think, I mean, I've been privileged to work for companies where senior leaders have really stepped into that and discussed it on town halls and talked about their own experiences, which I think is a huge destigmatized thing to do. I had my previous manager at Scotiabank would talk about her experiences during lockdown, and I think that very open discussion, destigmatizing everyone suffers from this is hugely important. So I think it's gone from a nothing to a problem to be solved through to, okay, how do we make this just part of who we are as an organization, and not a cost to be managed. And I think that's where the evolution is going, and hopefully will continue to go.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I often talk to HR leaders about how do we make this part of the fabric of the company versus it's a random benefit. Like, oh, you see it when you're, onboarded that first day. It's in your, 200-page welcome guide, and then that's the end of it, right? No. How is it part of recruiting and hiring and onboarding and training and promoting? And, it lives and breathes in the company. And then how do we shift the culture where we're reducing stigma, where we're creating permission, right? If somebody had a broken arm and they showed up to work, nobody would wonder about that, nor would they feel any shame in saying, I broke my arm. Well, maybe there's an embarrassing story behind it, but aside from that, right? How do we train managers to know what to look for, whether that's working remotely or working in person? And so my hope is that the trajectory is in a very, and it certainly appears to be, I remember when I graduated from school, like you could work 100 hours, like you could literally sleep under your desk, and it was just suck it up. And now I think, I think you and I talked about this. Like, I have a young son, right? He's 17 months old. He's probably not going to be in the workforce for a little while. But my hope is that by the time he does, it's a different place than the one that you and I inherited and came in.
And I think that's a really good point. Our mental health claims are within the top 5 of our long-term and short-term disability. So it costs us a lot of money, but it isn't. You can keep throwing different interventions of VAP and sort of meditation apps at it, and probably won't you'll make a difference. I think what will make a huge difference is that line manager relationship and understanding the importance of that role, not just in sort of mental health first aid. So it's not sort of saying, oh, I think Jenny's having a bit of a crisis, let's put her in touch with somebody. I think it's more around, okay, how do I create an environment for my team that is supportive of everyone's mental well-being? And it isn't about everyone being nice to each other, because that's now not how organizations work, although people to be polite. It's more around understanding sort of clarity of communication, setting realistic deadlines, understanding about work-life balance, and the fact that people do need to take time off, and they'll come back a much better person, or they're being open to feedback and challenge. So I think there's a much broader role for the line manager in creating this environment where mental health will thrive, or when well-being will thrive, and beyond the first aid and the sort of pointing to this is what HR have got for you, go and do that. So they have an enormous role in this, I think.
Yeah, and I think to your point about modeling it that you made before, I was having a conversation with a colleague the other day, and she had a personal issue, a loss, and she was about to say it, and then she's like, "Well, you share a lot," and it was like, I chuckled, but if I'm comfortable to share what I'm going through, good, bad, and otherwise, hopefully it creates the environment where other people can take that baton, and then they can share, and then we spend most of our time at work when we're awake, unfortunately, right? Most of our waking hours are spent working and not with our families. So we may as well be able to show up as our best self, which requires often sharing how you're doing in a true, authentic, real way. Let's transition a little bit from sort of the heartfelt stuff that we're talking about to more of the head or the pocketbook. Let's talk about the business case for mental health. So what are the biggest misconceptions about the financial impact of mental health benefits?
I think sometimes people don't even know what the financial implications are. I think we're getting better at analyzing it. In my experience, it's only the last 5 or 6 years we've done sort of the analysis of, okay, what's driving our different health claims. I mentioned before, it's mental health is one of our top 5. I'm sure it's no different to everybody else, and amongst that, it's anxiety and depression, which are the key elements. So I think you have to start from a data point of view. So you start with a data point of view. Okay, it's in our top 5. How much is it costing us as an organization? And then it's much easier to make some arguments around return on investment. If we do this and we're able to even make a very small impact on the number of people who go from good state to some issues through to sort of having more of a crisis through to sort of the extremists. If we can stop people moving down that, we should be able to save quite a significant amount of money. But also, actually, it's making the case the fact that actually somebody who is coming to work and is in a very positive position is going to be more engaged, more productive, a better colleague to their colleagues. So I think the getting finance over the line isn't always the easiest part, because actually you have to make it, there's a bit of a leap of faith to say these interventions will hopefully start to stop the movement down the continuum and stop people getting to the point where they're, on medication or some sort of deep therapies, which is not great for them and it's expensive to the organization. So start with the data, and I think then have a great conversation with the finance colleagues, and they're human as well. They're experiencing these things. You can usually have a great conversation to explain that actually, if we can stop people moving down here, this is a win-win-win-win for the organization, for the finance of the organization, for the productivity of the organization, and for the employee, and for the manager, and for their colleagues. If we can stop that happening, it is incrementally better for everybody.
Yeah, what I found is HR folks, people leaders, get it right away, right? Because they're closest to the action, right? So there's more of a, they're touching it, but oftentimes they may not be equipped to make the business case to the CFO to say, well, here's why spending $1 actually provides $2 or $3 or $4 in savings. Here in the States, we make the case, or we help our clients make the case really around healthcare costs, because when we're working with large companies, they're almost all self-insured. And so if a person's not, to your point, if a person's not getting care up front, and they hit the health plan, it becomes disproportionately expensive, right? And that tends to, I think, get a little bit more attention than some of the softer things like, hey, if I'm showing up at my best, I'm going to be more creative. I'm going to be more productive. I'm not going to cause as much damage because I'm showing up triggered. I haven't slept. And then I say something to this person, and then it ruins that person's day. And then they say something to the next person, and then on, right? Like if each member of my team could show up at their best every day, just imagine how much, stress you take out of the system, which just greases the wheels to be more efficient. But those softer things are a little bit harder. And I guess I'm curious, in the UK, and this is where I actually don't know, so I'm curious to hear your thoughts. How do you think about the balance of healthcare costs? Because you have a different healthcare system than we have here in the States versus some of those softer costs. Is it equally important, or is it, well, we don't really think about that part as much because it's not really on us?
Yeah, I mean, companies like us, we still have a sort of a private medical overlay over the top of the socialized healthcare system, the NHS. And so there's still a cost to the organization. I think the safety net is different. If people are in sort of extreme distress, they will be picked up. They don't have to pay any money. But I think sort of we still have a sort of a healthcare trust over the top, which pays for expedited treatment or different therapies. So even for the UK as well, it's a very similar discussion. It's probably not the same quantum of discussion in terms of amounts of dollars or pounds that are risk. But it is definitely a prize worth having the discussion in relation to preventative strategies in order to stop people ending up either in the NHS system and being unproductive, or actually using the private medical overlay. So it's a similar discussion, different quantum of impact.
And I'm actually curious. So my previous company, we had an office in London, and I'd probably spend, I don't know, a month a year there for a decade. And I guess I'm curious, who's more skeptical, UK CFOs or US CFOs?
Our US, and we spend a lot of time on US CFOs. They're more focused on this because the dollar impact is much greater. And I have to say, our finance colleagues are extremely engaged in this discussion, which is great. And they come at it from not just the finance angle; they come at it from a sort of a management and employee angle as well. So I think the US colleagues are definitely more focused because there's a much larger check to be written at the end if people do end up in that end of the extreme in terms of mental well-being.
Thanks for listening to the first half of the episode. I hope you're walking away with some valuable insights. I want to take a quick pause to tell you about my book, The Mental Health Advantage. If you found this conversation useful, you'll find 300 more pages packed with strategies, insights, and real-world applications. Grab your copy on Amazon. Just check the show notes for the link. And if you're looking for a more comprehensive mental health solution for your company, let's chat. You'll find another link in the show notes to reach out and explore how Journey can help you. Now back to the show. All right. So companies often struggle with low engagement with traditional EAPs. So what have you seen that's worked in terms of driving adoption and utilization?
Uh, Road shows are really good. I mean, we're sort of coming back to the office now much more, and we have campuses, so we have big concentrations of employees in different places in New York or London. So what we've found is getting the providers all together in terms of a benefits roadshow has been great, and getting external speakers. We had speakers coming in talking about children's psychology or bereavement, and those interventions on the back of maybe a benefits fair have had huge engagement, because then people come in and they speak to colleagues they speak to the providers. We've also found that making sure it's really well integrated with the other medical plans, I mean, much more in the US than here. We won't take on a provider unless they're able to really seamlessly integrate the EAP with our medical coverage. And we want it because that it has to be as seamless as possible. If people are sort of having to come out of one system and then go into another, or deal with one provider and then go to another provider and getting conflicting responses, people will disengage. If you're not feeling your best, that small barriers will put you off, and that's exactly the opposite of what we need. So we've tried to make it as integrated and seamless so that all the providers talk to each other and are able to overlap and cross-refer, most in the US. And then it's been very much a tone from the top. If ever there is, unfortunately, it's a sort of slightly chaotic world, any of the sort of the things that happen where we need to provide employee support, we're always pushing the EAP. The last paragraph is always, and absolutely is what you need to do. And then actually what we've done is we've used our EAP providers to do very specific sessions for, if there's a world event, we'll set up very specific sessions for that. And that small populations maybe go to it, but actually just the knowledge of other employees that we're doing these things raises that awareness. So we're constantly trying to push the narrative, make it as joined up as possible, as you'd imagine with a company like us, make it branded like in a very accessible, very positive way. But actually, I think you just have to keep pushing it. Employees will not remember, so it needs to be front of mind the whole time. What we haven't quite got there yet is how do we do things like sort of chatbots and things like that integrate it all, and that's something we're quite excited about. We're quite an AI company, so we're trying to work out how do we use AI much more effectively to help employees access the right bit of care, especially in the US where there's like multiple providers. But we haven't made a lot of progress there, but it's something we're quite excited about.
Yeah, actually, as are we. We acquired an AI company in January of last year that helps us with therapy matching, so combining human intuition with artificial intelligence to make sure members are always getting the right therapist. But we're actually building something now, which I'm happy to talk to you about in more detail, to basically make sure we're getting people the right care, because most of our clients, especially the bigger the company, the more stuff they offer. And employees don't know about it. They don't know where to look. It's confusing. And so how do we leverage artificial intelligence to just direct people to the right resources based on their needs while making it super simple and seamless? When it comes to driving engagement, we have a couple of proprietary things. One is this process called JEDI, Journey Engagement Discovery Interview, where we go really deep with stakeholders across the company to understand the organization, the culture, the strategy. And we use that to build out a really robust plan. And one thing that I don't think you and I ever talked about is we sort of took a page out of your book, or at least your world, which is we created an in-house innovation lab called Studio E. And the idea is to innovate and test all different types of engagement to just see what works across, hey, if we try this at Beck and Dickinson in Canada, if we try this at Lululemon in Mexico, if we try this at, right, how do we combine these different things to see what's working and what's not? Because driving engagement is hard, and we feel like we've cracked the code on certain things, but we want to continue to drive that. So, with a traditional EAP, low single digit engagement, we're getting many times more than that. But we know that, to your point, there's no silver bullet. It's not like, when we send this one email, when we have, the CEO say this one thing at this one meeting, then, our work is done for the next 5 years, right? It's how do we embed it? How do we think about it creatively in a way where people are constantly inundated with ads and work and life and everything else, that it just is just there for them. There for them. So
I think it's a great point, because what we haven't cracked is you want to have multiple different intervention solutions, and you want to have multiple different channels. Some employees want to speak to a person, some want to use an app, someone to use a bot, some just want to do text chatting. So you have multiple things in multiple channels, and I think, which is necessary, but I think what we haven't quite done, to your point, is say, okay, employee, how do you navigate to which of the channel and which of the products is the right one for whatever you're experiencing, especially if you wake up in the morning, you didn't sleep very well, you yelled at your spouse and whatever, you probably aren't going to make this. Do you immediately go, I need ICB, or you need this? There is a bit of a gap between market and customer, I think, sometimes in this. That I think technology will hopefully help us to bridge.
Yeah, I think that's right. All right, let's look ahead. Something tells me the letters AI are going to come up in this answer, but what trends do you see shaping the future of total rewards and employee mental health over the next 5 years?
Yeah, I think there's going to be I've said it a few times, and it isn't AI this one, but is preventative. I think we've all cottoned on to the benefits of early interventions, or actually not even that, but actually making sure people are preserving their good mental health. So it isn't about sort of not getting worse, but how do you just keep it really good? And so I think there's a focus on prevention. I think there's probably going to be more of a holistic view of physical, mental, social, and emotional well-being, all being interconnected. I for one know for sure I feel much better when I'm exercising a lot more, and so I think there's sort of that understanding and that interconnection of those different elements of well-being. I think sort of integration into other healthcare plans is going to carry on. I think our expectation now of all our providers is you're not standalone, you're part of an ecosystem. So I think people will need to come in and integrate. And I think, communication. It's just, you just have to keep pushing the message, destigmatizing it, and understanding. Data helps here, because we have 15% utilization of men versus women. Now, you can read into that a lot of things. It probably isn't that men are more sort of mentally healthy. In fact, it's probably the opposite. And so sort of some destigmatization through communication of senior leaders and men talking about this is probably something we would look at as well. So I think there's some sort of using the data to understand the populations that we need to reach and how do we reach them. And AI, of course.
I was looking at this is actually kind of funny aside. I was looking at valuations for different companies in the health tech space. Somebody had sent it over, an investor had sent it over to me earlier this morning. And you go down this one column that's valuation based on revenue, and it's like 3.2x, 2.4, 1.7, 6.1, down, and they're all, single digits. And then all of a sudden you see 300, and my eyes just went to the right, and it was like something AI. And it's like you add AI to anything, and all of a sudden it's so much more valuable. And so anyway, let's actually stay where we are in terms of looking ahead. You mentioned a couple different things. One of the things that we like to do is think about how we can leverage predictive analytics to get care to people before they know they need it, right? And how do we do that in a non-invasive, not big brother way, where it's not, hey, we're reading all your text messages and we saw that you seem a little triggered, right? Or we're reading all your, Slack or Teams, like that might be a little much, but maybe there's other ways to say, how do we catch things? Because with some people, right, some parts of mental health are genetic, right? We're born a certain way, but a lot is environmental, right? Hey, I'm stressed about the election. I'm worried about my kid. And then on top of that, my car got hit while it was parked, and now I have to deal with that. And my boss is really giving me a lot of, I guess I can curse on here, right? My boss is giving me a lot of shit about X, Y, and Z. And then all of a sudden it snowballs from I'm having trouble sleeping to I'm anxious to I'm depressed to I'm not eating. And then, right. And then next thing you know, somebody who was theoretically healthy or in the normal, realm of things has now declined into something where it becomes not just mental, but also physical, right? And then they're having panic attacks, or their stomach is causing ulcers. And then it becomes quite obviously challenging for them, challenging for the workplace, challenging for their family, challenging for their community, quite expensive. And so we think about, as we look ahead, how are the ways that we can be smart about using predictive analytics to catch things sooner? I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
A couple of thoughts on that. One was sort of, we have done some analysis of the populations who are accessing the mental health benefits at work, which gives us an idea of the demographics that are sort of maybe most prone to have reached that point in the sort of where they're going to be needing some help. So that is quite helpful. And then you can do a bit more targeted communications, because I think targeted communications are really important. Actually, if you can sort of say, pick a population, say, maybe it's this team, or it's that that office, or it's that sort of maybe some demographic around sort of gender and ethnicity or something like that. The other thing I think, I was just thinking as you were talking, and which would be really interesting, is to see what the correlation is between external events and these sort of peaks or troughs. I was just thinking in terms of there'll be times during the year, or there'll be events or things that maybe impact one community much more. Maybe it's the LGBT community, or it's the Black community, or it's women or something, and news or issues or problems, and maybe understanding how those will then make people less resilient and therefore more susceptible to some mental health challenges, and then maybe getting ahead of those might be a good way of sort of almost predictive analytics, because it's not usually one thing that creates the problem, but it's normally multiple layers of issues, and it's that sort of that, and maybe sort of if we can sort of say, actually, here's the sort of the, maybe an at-risk population, and actually here's some sort of external contextual things from a environmental point of view that might sort of exacerbate that, then you might be able to sort of quite neatly pick up on populations that would be the ones who are going to suffer most.
Yeah, and I feel like we're probably further ahead than most companies when it comes to this, and yet still scratching the surface. So we get varying amounts of information from our clients. Some give us nothing. Thankfully, that's only a few. Some give us an eligibility list, first name, last name, email. And more, although still not the majority, are giving us a full employee census. So if we know that you're in LA during the wildfires, it's not helpful if we just sit there and wait, right? It's helpful if we reach out and say, hey, you have resources available, because we don't know what you're going through. Maybe your house is fine. Maybe you need elder care to take care of your parents. Maybe you need child care. Maybe you need therapy. Maybe, like the EAP program is very broad and deep, right? In terms of what it offers. And maybe you need financial support, right? Because something did impact your house. Other examples, if we see that your number of dependents has gone up or has gone down, something happened. We don't need to know if that's a birth or a death or a divorce or a marriage, but there's been a life transition. Hey, just want you to know you have resources available. Right. So just touching people at the right time. There's a great book called Nudge. I don't know if you've ever seen it or heard of it, but Google based their whole recognition program on that, which was my line of work for a decade before starting Journey. And so there's a lot of great nuggets in there about how we can nudge people to make certain decisions or take certain actions in a healthy way, whether it's about where you place different foods and things like that. And so there's a lot of things there that we try to apply, going back to the psychology. So just be there for people when they need it, because that's really important, right? Because oftentimes when you're triggered or when you're in a stressful situation, you can't see fully, right? Your visibility, literally in your brain, right? It just changes. And so how do we make sure that people are aware that there is support available? All right. If you could change one thing about how companies approach total rewards and mental health today, what would it be?
I think I touched on it earlier. I think I would move the discussion away from adding interventions and benefits to how do we create an environment which is all around creating a workplace that's supportive of mental health. So I think it's almost in everything you do. It's sort of how line managers operate, how you communicate. So doesn't become a benefit problem or a benefit issue to be solved. It becomes an everyone responsibility. But I do come back to, I do think, my line manager, I have a team of 40, and I do realize that a lot of how the team operates is down to how I operate and how I show up. You can ask them; they probably wouldn't say, "Oh, we show up brilliantly." But to be conscious of that, I think we should be conscious of that, because how you create the environment for your team and everyone's within the team is a large part of their working day, and whether they want to come in the morning, and whether they feel you can approach you with a problem, and or they can give you feedback. And so I think it's shifting it from being a benefits issue to a everyone responsibility.
Yeah, I love that. Well, they say culture eats strategy for breakfast. So how do we make it part of the culture? One of our values is trust through safety and courage. And the idea is, truth through safety and courage. how can we show up as our best selves where we can share our truth that may be tough to hear? How can we create a safe space for people? And it's one of those things that, I'd say of all the values, you hear truth through safety and courage a lot at Journey. It even comes up in Slack messages. The idea being like, we're all responsible for this, right? We're all responsible for creating that environment that we want to work in. And that's not easy, right? We're imperfect beings, to your point. Like sometimes we show up in a good mood, sometimes we don't, sometimes we're not even aware of that, right? All right, as we come to a close, so this highlighted how mental health benefits are evolving to meet the needs of global workforces, how to balance cost and impact, how companies like WPP are thinking about the future of total rewards. Dominic, any final thoughts for today?
I mean, I would just say, keep talking about it. I think one of the best things that's happened over the last few years is actually that very significant destigmatization of talking about mental well-being. When our CEO talks about it on a town hall, I'm like, that's brilliant. He thinks it's important, then the company will start thinking it's important. So I think it's keep the narrative going and to employees understand that this is something that is the organization values. So for me, it's keep talking about it and then back it up with good actions as well.
I love that. Well, Dominic, thank you so much for sharing your perspective today. It's always fun to talk to you, to hear your wisdom personally, professionally, and to hear to hear about the great work that WPP is doing. So thank you.
Thank you. I've really enjoyed it.
All right. If you've enjoyed today's conversation, don't forget to subscribe to the Mental Health Advantage, leave a review, share with a friend. Thank you all. Have a beautiful day. Thanks for spending this time with us. We know you're busy. If you enjoyed today's conversation, be sure to subscribe to the Mental Health Advantage and leave a review. Thanks so much and have a beautiful day.